Hello folks, it's me, Kerbanaut here, and welcome back to episode 9 of Let's Actually Play Kerbal Space Program. Last time we left off with our arrival at Duna, and the probe that was going to stick its nose in Duna's business. That sounds kind of weird actually, but you know, discover Duna and unveil its mysteries. So yes, we are continuing with that at this moment in time. So here is the probe. It is coming down low over Duna, and we have to retract the solar panels because if we leave them out, Duna's thin atmosphere will have a go at them and try to rip them off, which isn't very suitable for us. So we come over Duna, and we've got a small heat shield that you can see is ablating away and getting blown away by the winds of Duna, just so that we don't overheat. Now, I probably didn't need the heat shield for this because Duna's atmosphere is actually really thin, and you don't get a lot of bother from it when you're coming in. So really, I didn't need it, but it's just an aesthetic choice as well. You know, it's handy. Plus, it keeps us slowing down and makes it, you know, it's nice to have a heat shield. Anyway, we come down over Duna and we see that there's clouds. There's wonderful, magical, mystical clouds on Duna. This is from the Eve pack, the Environmental Visual Enhancements mod. And the clouds are actually really nice. Anyway, we deploy our parachutes and come down for the landing and bounce. And fall over, incidentally, because seemingly I can't, for the life of me, land a small probe, which isn't very good when you're trying to land a small probe. So what we try and do is we try to lower these two legs, right? Because we want to try and tip back onto the legs, but with them, if we keep them out, we're not going to be able to, you know, twist the little probe in such a way that it goes back onto them. So we use the engine, is basically what we do. We're using this engine just to get some energy so that we can try and change the lateral energy that we gain from the engine into a little bump, like we have just done here. And we use the gear, the landing gear as well, just to, the landing legs, just to kind of bounces up and down, and we finally get up into a standing position. Unfortunately, throughout that ordeal we did lose a solar panel, which is a shame. However, we do have another solar panel, and we have a small one that's attached to the side right there, you can see it. So we have enough energy, it's just not as aesthetically pleasing. Anyway, we do the science that we came to do. We get a mystery goo report from the surface of Duna, and we also kind of take a look around, have a look at the sites, and get a thermometer, a temperature reading from the surface of Duna. So we get lots of little bits of science, and we transmit them off. Of course, we can't maximize our transmission value with a lab, because this is just a small probe, it cannot carry a lab. Anyway, we are now having to launch a new mission. If you look in the top left hand corner of the screen, you will see that we have a Kerbin to Eve transfer window coming up. Now this window we are going to utilize. We have the science to go to Eve. And we are going to, you know, make use of this transfer window. There won't be one coming up for another age, so we might as well make use of this. So, what is this? This is a transfer vehicle. Now, this won't be doing the transfer itself. We will need to launch up a few more modules just to dock onto it, but this is going to be the bulk of it. This is the largest module of the transfer vehicle. And it's going to be holding our crew, and it's got a lab on there as well, so that we can refresh our science things as well. If we didn't have the lab on there, we'd end up just having to bring tons and tons of science equipment, and you kind of save weight when you bring a sciencey lab thing with you. Anyway, this is another module that we're launching up. This is a lander, Now you may be thinking, what? They're going to Eve? You got a lander and your freaking rocket's that size? No way, that's a lander for Eve. And you are completely correct. We're not going to land on Eve. That would be ludicrous. Unless it was a probe, in which case I might send a probe off to Eve at some point, but not in this episode. This is a lander for Gilly, Eve's moon. Gilly has a extremely low weight. Sorry, weight. Well, it's probably comparatively low weight as well, but you know, its mass is very low, which means it doesn't have a lot of gravitational pull to it. What this means for us is we don't need to use engines, and that's one big saving in weight for the ship that has to go to Eve. It means we don't have to lug along fuel for engines to land on Gilly. We in fact only need RCS, and so that's what that wee lander is going to be using to land on Eve. Oh, land on Gilly. It's going to be using some RCS. Anyway, what we do is we set up a transfer into a transfer orbit just so that we can hop over to this ship. Now, I have called this mission the Chroma mission. This is Chroma 1, so all of the modules together will make up Chroma 1. Now, this large ship is the habitat module, and the smaller ship is the lander, and that's going to fit on in the back there. But first we're going to dock on this upper stage of the launcher that took the lander up. That's just going to transfer some fuel in and whatnot, so that'll just be quite handy to have there as well. And then it's going to get deorbited, but first we have to get this lander docked on. Now, I had a few problems when I was designing kind of the two of these ships and joining up. I actually designed them at the same time in the VAB. They were all one vehicle and I just broke them down into sub-assemblies, but the first time I did it I had some major problems, just because, like, obviously in the vehicle assembly building you get some accidental part clipping, and then when you're actually out in the Kerbal universe you can't part clip without going to time warp, and so it got really difficult for me to fit it in, and so I had to launch this up a couple of times, but I do get it this time, and we dock on, and while we are up here in Kerbin orbit with all of this scientific equipment, we might as well do some science. So we do a wee bit of science and just put it through the lab and transmit it back to Kerbin so that they can wonder in awe at the majestic science that is getting transmitted to them through the radio antennae. Anyway, this module has done its job. We did actually shift its orbit a little bit, but I ended up just almost cancelling that. I was hoping that I could get it close to Sphere Station, but that didn't work out at all. So basically this module here has no other purpose, so we're just going to deorbit it. It has a small probe underneath the docking port, which is going to allow us to control it. So yep, there we go, we have set it into Kerbin. Now, basically what happened here was my recording software stopped recording, which is a pain. However, I've decided to tell you what has happened before, what was happening when I wasn't recording. So basically what I did was I sent up Leo. Leo is the SSTO, if you haven't been following along with my earlier episodes. Leo is an SSTO designed to go from Kerbin to LKO. And it will take a small payload up with it, along with a few Kerbals. So this time its payload was a nuclear engine with a small tank of fuel and a docking port. And what we do is we take the crew shuttle that takes crew from Kerbin up to the Sphere Station, and we dock it onto that. And together, they bring the nuclear engine over to Chroma 1. So that is basically the plan, and here's the docking that the crew shuttle and the nuclear engine basically docking onto Chroma 1, obviously the crew shuttle doesn't have a docking port on its other side, so what it has to do is it has to line up with Chroma 1 and undock from the nuclear engine, get out the way, and then let the engine dock without any guidance. So it's like bowling. You have to point it in the right direction, let it go, and let it do its own thing and hope that it hits. And thankfully we did get it to dock first time, and that was brilliant. So yeah, we then bring this all the way back to Sphere Station. It has no fuel in it, and it has practically no, I'm going to say practically no RCS, however it does have a little bit left. So yeah, we dock that on there, which is you know, handy to still have. It means that if an emergency does occur on the Sphere Station, we can still get some of our pilots out of there and landed on Kerbin. Anyway, this is Leo coming back down into Kerbin to land at the KSC. It's coming down quite high in the atmosphere. I had tested this a while ago, before, you know, the very first few times I was actually flying it. So that's, I think, an episode or two ago, and basically testing beforehand showed that if we slow down up higher in the atmosphere and then just went straight in lower in the atmosphere, we would get a lot of re-entry heat, but we wouldn't overheat. And it's quite easy to overshoot and whatnot. You have to plan it precisely. So I found a new way of coming in, and that is basically to have your periaps at about 30 kilometers, maybe 20 kilometers, quite far away from the KSC. So it's like almost half a planet away from KSC. And then what you do is you just bleed off all your velocity high up in the atmosphere. If you keep a nice high angle of attack, you'll slow down and keep yourself close to your apoaps, meaning that you can slow down and stay high in the atmosphere until you need to come down. Now here we go, we're coming in for a landing, and I was very pleased with this landing actually. If I was to turn on the audio at the end of this landing, you would hear me kind of doing my little dance of success as I celebrate this amazing landing, because this entire landing took me, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, just because the whole thing was in atmosphere and I need to control it all the way. So it was a long landing, but in the end I'm very pleased with how it went, and I think I'm going to be using this descent profile from now on with Leo. Now, back over to Celia Station. Now, it's been sitting in Minmus orbit doing pretty much nothing for the past wee while. So I decide that we still haven't got all the science from Minmus. I went online and I kind of did a wee search and kind of had a look around basically to see what biomes Minmus has. And I decided that we haven't got all the science. We need to go back. There's still quite a lot to get. And so we decide to return. However, you may have noticed from an earlier launch that I have installed one more mod, and it's clearly visible here. And that mod is Better Atmospheres. Now, they recently released version 5. I had been keeping up with the forum thread at version 4. You know, I was just waiting for version 5 to come out before I put it into this Let's Play. So it did come out, version 5, and it is beautiful, I must say. It is a bit of a lag monster. I do get a lot more than I used to without it. However, I think it's worth it. It's a deliciously beautiful mod, and I'm glad I installed it. But a few things it adds is, well, I mean, of course its name says, you know, better atmospheres. It does add better atmospheres, and it adds a nice look to most planets. But another thing it adds is clouds, kind of clouds not only on Kerbin at different layers, but also on Minmus and on Duna and whatnot. Now on Minmus, you think, you know, why is there clouds on Minmus? It's a vacuum. But in fact, it's probably not a vacuum. If it was in real life, I recently did a video kind of explaining why, you know, space isn't actually empty. If you want, you can go check that out. But basically, you know, there's lots of little particles in space, and especially near celestial bodies. For example, on the moon, that's MOON on real life. it's said to have, an exosphere, so it has little particles that are gravitationally bound to it. So that's little pieces of lunar regolith, sorry, that get kicked up by solar radiation and whatnot. So the same thing could happen with Minmus in theory. So all of this could just be little pieces of dust floating around, and in fact that's probably quite dangerous for astronauts, or should I say Kerbonauts. In the Apollo missions, they had a look afterwards and realized that the lunar regolith was actually incredibly jagged. It was really just a matter of luck that none of the regolith spiked into the suit. I mean, obviously the particles are extremely small, but they could have easily torn into the suit, the spacesuit, and kind of got in, maybe exposed it to a vacuum. There's a lot of dangers there, and they took that into consideration later on. However, thankfully, our Kerbals don't have to deal with that. We don't need to do that. So we return to orbit around Minmus to Celia Station. We dock, unload all of our science, refuel a wee bit, and reset our science containers, all of which you don't see because that is extremely boring and I hate doing it. I really wish I could find just a very simple mod to let me do that very quickly. I'm going to go and search away for that later, but we do return to the Minmus Flats. Here we see more clouds in the backgrounds. They actually look a bit lighter here. I'm not sure why that is, but you can see the density of the clouds does change from place to place, and it's pretty awesome. So we get out and we do our science. Now there are a few biomes we haven't visited. We've not visited, for example, these are the Great Flats. I say, yeah, these flats are pretty great, so where are the bedrooms then? But I'm not sure. I think these Kerbals expect the flats to contain en-suites and whatnot. I think they're going to be thoroughly disappointed by the vast expanse of space with nothing in it. Who knows, maybe someone will set up a hotel and rent out flats on the flats. Maybe it'll be called the Flat Flats. But yes, this happened, and it's a pain. It really is. I broke a solar panel, and I was having such a good track record as well. Jebediah was not being let anywhere near these solar panels, so I think what he did was he had a wee word with Mr. Luke Kerman and told him just, slip in a wee panel breaking right there. I think Jebediah has convinced this poor Kerbal to do his dirty work for him. Anyway, with a little grin on his face, he returns to orbit, returns to Celia Station, and forgets to put away his landing gear. We do dock though, so it doesn't really matter. We have the the magnets to keep us pulled in towards Celia Station. Anyway, we transfer all the science over again, and so all of the science that we've gained over the past few landings have been transferred into this ferry. And the ferry is going to be taking all of the bountiful sciences of Minmus back to Kerbin. It's going to be shooting them off, and it's going to be using an aero brake around Kerbin to slow it down and get to Sphere Station. Unfortunately, we do encounter the moon, which is a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a new alarm in for the Sphere of Influence change, because we've got to hop out to Chroma 1 because their transfer window's coming up. You see we've got 4 hours, so their transfer window's coming up, so I'm just going to make that transfer burn now as opposed to later. So we begin the transfer burn, and it is a long transfer burn. You can see it's about, what was it, 6-7 minutes. And I was expecting it to be that long, but it's just that way we have to sit there and wait and wait and wait and correct any little things that go wrong. Unfortunately, I designed this ship rather poorly. I have a decoupler there, which is stopping the fuel from transferring to that small tank at the back. So basically I have to keep on manually balancing the fuel and pump it into that back tank. But we get the burn done eventually, finally, yes, and we set up another node and put an alarm for that node. So we're going to make a correction burn just to get us nice and close in to Eve and get us in the right plane. We then add another alarm so that we know when we're exiting the sphere of influence, because if we swap out to another ship and warp so fast that this ship goes out of its sphere of influence at high warp, we'll lose a lot of accuracy in the orbit. So basically the correction node that we've put down will have no effect. We'll have to redo that node all over again. So it's just a safety measure. Anyway, we warp through the moon encounter that we had and we come down over Kerbin, but we will see the docking with Sphere Station and all of that lovely science getting transmitted back to Kerbin in the next episode. Until then, bye bye.